Howdy my totally tubular movie watchers, we're back with another ranking video. You know, today's Halloween, it's time to be spooky, and for Halloween I thought I'd have a special ranking video, but for once I'm not going to talk about games. No, today I thought I would actually rank a movie series. It's not often you'll find me talking about movies that don't have sharks in them, but today I thought for Halloween we would rank the entire Saw franchise. Yes, the Saw movies. The truly ultra-violent, unhinged horror franchise that has been shocking and scaring people for nearly 20 years. So with the most recent release of Saw X, I was like, hey, for the month of October, let's just watch all of the Saw movies. And so yeah, that's what we did. We watched all 10 of the Saw movies. And then I thought for Halloween it would be fun to rank all of the movies. Now, I am no film critic. I am no professional reviewer when it comes to films. Gaming is much more my wheelhouse. I have seen barely any films in comparison to games I've played. And so this is just my opinion. No, I'm just some guy that likes horror movies and gore. I very much remember the Saw movies coming out and the impact they had in the 2000s, but I never ever was going to go see one, and it wasn't until now where I finally actually sat down and watched all of them. So yeah, we're going to be ranking the Saw movies worst to best, and we're going to stack them all up against each other, see which ones are pretty good, which ones are worth watching, which ones are really gory, and which ones are so bad you just shouldn't even bother. I'm basing this ranking off just my own personal viewing. You know, how much did I enjoy the movie? How's the gore? How's the traps? How's the story? Is the story so stupid and nonsensical that I just was like, what the fuck? Or was I like, wow, this is really good? How's the twist? You know, almost all these movies have some big twist, and when it comes to that, I'm going to try my best to not spoil these movies. There might be some very minor spoilers, but for the most part, I'm going to talk vague. And in terms of what you're seeing on screen, I'm just going to have some clips from the trailers, and that's it. I'm not going to be showing hella the movie or anything like that, and I'm not going to describe what happens to some of these people in really gruesome details, because trust me, it gets really gruesome. We don't need this video getting flagged. But anyway, enough of that. This is just my opinion. Let me know down below what your favorite Saw movies are, why you agree, disagree, why you think I'm just a dumbass who doesn't understand the series, whatever it is you want to tell me. Like, share, comment, subscribe. We got a super thanks and Patreon going on as well. Any support is greatly appreciated. And so let's get into it. Of the 10 Saw movies, which one do I think is the worst? I think the worst of the Saw movies is Saw 3D, also known as Saw the Final Chapter, releasing in 2010. This is the 7th Saw movie, not just in release order, but chronologically as well. And you know, 7 movies in, it doesn't really matter what the film franchise is, it's going to be hard to keep it fresh. I mean, just ask Star Wars. Oh, that was actually really good. That was off the cuff. That was ad-lib. I'm keeping that in. Yeah, just ask Star Wars how hard it is to keep the 7th movie fresh when it comes to its story, plot, characters, motivation, or just doing something different from the previous 6 films. Look, Saw 3D, I'll just be honest, this is one of the worst horror movies like I've ever seen, and it feels like a parody of other Saw movies. It feels completely out of place with the rest of the series, especially tonally, where it just feels completely off from the previous 6 movies, like something was just totally lost in translation. The plot is stupid, the gore sucks, the traps aren't very good, and it's a really unsatisfying conclusion to the story of Saw. Now, I don't have a degree in film, I didn't go to school for it, I don't have the most complex understanding of it, but this movie just seems really shittily filmed. Like, it's edited together really poorly. The filters and the lighting are just all over the place in this movie. The contrast sucks. It's not gritty at all. The aesthetic, the atmosphere, it's just not there. The movie is incredibly horny, way more than the other Saw movies for like no reason. The gore and special effects in general look just terrible. You know, this movie came out when they were really pushing that 3D shit, and it just looks terrible now. Like, it looks ridiculous, and the gore sucks. The gore in the old ones are way better. The CGI is not good here. I don't think the gore is good. The special effects aren't good. And then the traps are terrible also. None of them were memorable or interesting, and it just kind of had me groaning, going like, oh, this again? Which is how I kind of felt watching the whole movie. It just felt like been there, done that, and all the heart and soul that went into those old Saw movies was just not here at all. And the story, it's just so stupid. I wasn't a fan of the characters, the motivations, the antagonist, the twist. The twist in particular at the end is really stupid, and it just doesn't really make any sense. I also hate how this movie goes out of its way to explain shit about the older Saw movies that honestly just didn't need to be explained. It was best left unexplained, and now it's like we have this shitty explanation. The story was incredibly uninspired, and by the time the movie was over, I was like, oh, thank God, it's finally over. That movie went on way too long, or at least it felt like it went on way too long. Yeah, no, this movie movie sucks. It's really just a waste of time and not worth watching, not even for the most die-hard Saw fans. And here we have Jigsaw releasing in 2017. I actually did go see this one in the theaters. This was the first Saw movie I ever saw, and yeah, I was lost as hell, but after rewatching it, after watching all these other Saw movies, yeah, this movie's pretty stupid also. After the disaster that was Saw 3D, they did go like 6 or 7 years without a Saw movie, but here we are with Jigsaw, the 8th movie chronologically, and it doesn't really reference Saw 3D like at all. It references, the older Saw movies that people actually like, and that's about it. And it sees people in a new violent game. Yeah, the story, it isn't so great here, especially if you've seen a bunch of the other Saw movies, then you can see the twist coming a mile away. The twist in general just wasn't very good, and really it's just disappointing with how predictable it is. At least the acting, is half decent this time. It's certainly better than whatever Saw 3D had going on, and the people were decently convincing. It's a shame the traps weren't the most imaginative. They're certainly better than Saw 3Ds, but I couldn't really tell you like any of them from this movie outside of the big spinning shit. And I just saw this movie the other day. It really just kind of blended in with the other Saw movies. Like, maybe that's what I get for watching 8 movies in the span of a month, but yeah, it just kind of blended in with the other Saws. The traps and big moments just really weren't there for me. They were just nowhere near as imaginative as the old movies. And then when it comes to the gore, yeah, it just doesn't look very good. Like, they really rely on special effects and CGI, and it just doesn't look anywhere near as good as the old movies. Like, I wasn't really wincing much at it because I was like, dude, this looks just fake as shit. I'd say some of the gore was far-fetched even for Saw. And speaking of far-fetched, we just have the story in general where it's like, dude, how many secret fucking apprentices does John Kramer have? Like, is his cat a secret apprentice too? It just is ridiculous. And it got to a point where I was like, no, I can't suspend my disbelief this much. Like, this is just ridiculous. It's stupid. And I just didn't like it. At least tonally, they kind of got the feel of the older ones down much more than 3D, but I just didn't really care for the aesthetic or atmosphere this movie had going on. I just didn't really care for this movie in general. And I just don't think it's worth a watch. It's not very good. And so here we have Saw 5 releasing in 2008. Now, Saw 5 really is a direct sequel to Saw 4 and how it ends, and so it's about these two detectives really going at it. And then, of course, John Kramer's dying wishes, yada, yada, yada. You know how it goes. A lot of this movie is just backstory. They give a lot of backstory on the detectives and how he came into the fold and John Kramer's secret apprentice. And then, of course, another game going on. I just didn't really care much for the story of Saw 5. Like, neither of the detectives really interested me all that much. I was like, yeah, they're just kind of there. I kind of liked how mysterious the detective was in like the 4th one, and here they really do explain like everything. And as for the game going on, I just really couldn't care much about it. Like, any of the people in it, I just couldn't care what happened to them. And I can kind of say the same thing about the traps. I just didn't really care for them. Most of them, they were just kind of there. The one at the beginning with the box, I think that one's actually pretty good, but it's at the beginning of the movie, and the ending one is decent. In fact, the ending is probably the best part of this whole movie. It's really like the only time outside of the very beginning where I actually sat up and went, oh shit, because the ending, yeah, it's actually pretty good. When it comes to the gore and the violence and the effects in this movie, I think it's pretty decent to good. There are some really brutal scenes in this movie, but it doesn't go out of fucking control like some of the earlier movies. The gore, yeah, it was alright. So overall, I'd say Saw 5 is pretty meh for the most part. It doesn't feel like a total waste of time like 7 and 8, and it does continue the story on into 6, and it is a good follow-up to 4, but on its own, I just don't really think it's all that great, man. I didn't really care for the detectives just going at it. Like, I know some people have said they really do like the dynamics between the two of them, but I just didn't really give a shit. Still, if you're a big Saw fan and you've watched the first 4, I mean, fuck it, what's one more? And here we have Spiral from the Book of Saw releasing in 2021. Now, this movie is one of the more interesting movies in the Saw series. See, it's kind of connected to the other Saw movies, but at the same time, it's really not. It also stars Chris Rock, and it's the only Saw movie to not feature John Kramer, Tobin Bell returning. Like, a picture of him shows up here, but he's really not in the movie. The movie's really about Chris Rock's a detective chasing down a Jigsaw copycat. And the story's kind of interesting. It does feel different from the other Saw movies, I can give it that, but at the same time, it still feels just as formulaic as the other Saw movies with the traps, the structure, and especially the ending where I was like, yeah, this very much feels like a Saw movie, but they tried to make it a little different with Chris Rock's and the whole detective storyline. And speaking of Chris Rock's, like, he really is not only the main character, but like the main focus of the entire story. And so if you don't like Chris Rock, you're definitely not going to like this movie. When it comes to the story as a whole, like, it's fine. I'm not going to say it's great, but it's not exactly the most interesting or original. Now, Chris Rock's as an actor, I think he's just kind of all over the place. This movie's so weird with him, like tonally and just his acting in general. Sometimes he's crazy expressive and actually good, and a lot of the times he's really still just Chris Rock with a bunch of stupid jokes, and a bunch of jokes do show up here, and it's like not funny at all. Like, don't get it twisted, I think Chris Rock's generally is pretty funny. I think he was pretty funny and Everybody Hates Chris, and that one time on the Oscars was just great, but like, this is not the context where he should be making jokes. Like, they are so out of place in this movie, and it just clashes heavily with the movie's tone. Like, there's some really serious parts, and he's out here making stupid jokes, and it's like, dude, what even is going on? Like, this is so just out of pocket. Like, what are these doing here? When it comes to the acting for everyone else, I mean, it's fine. I'm not gonna say it's great, but it's all right. Samuel, you know, the few scenes he's actually in are pretty decent, but he's barely even in the movie. As for the traps and the gore, it's pretty on point for Saw. When it comes to the traps, you know, I wasn't huge on them. They're just a little too overcomplicated, in my opinion. We don't need these Looney Tunes ass traps. Like, we could have some simple ones here, but they're all very complex and supposed to be symbolic and have a deeper meaning and stuff, but I don't know, they just came off as a little try-hardy and generally just extra, at least in my opinion. When it comes to the gore though, yeah, I think this was actually pretty good. The gore was pretty decent. It was a lot better than Jigsaw's, and it looked like there was some half-decent CGI and budget here, so yeah, I think the gore was okay. At least the movie kind of had the Saw aesthetic, I can say that over Saw 3D, but overall, Spiral, this movie's like okay at best. At worst, it's just not really worth watching. You know, if you're a diehard Saw fan, you might like it because it's something slightly different, but I just couldn't recommend this movie really to anybody. You know, it just kind of exists, and it's really strange in the Saw timeline, and here we are. And here we have Saw 4, which released in 2007. Now, Saw 4 really picks up right where Saw 3 left off, which really picked up where Saw 2 left off. You know, if you jump into one of these movies without watching the previous couple, you're going to be so lost. But Saw 4 really is about the aftermath of Saw 3 and sees investigators, well, investigating. And that's all I'm really going to say. When it comes to the story, it's okay, but I'm not going to say it's one of the strongest stories in the series. At least the ending is pretty good, and the twist in the ending, yeah, I think it's solid enough, but throughout the entire movie, yeah, the story's just okay. It was kind of cool though to learn more about John Kramer. They're really fleshing him out as a character. He's more than just this mysterious old man that wants people to pay, which, yeah, I think that's cool. Now, when it comes to the traps in this movie, it was decent enough. There's some creative ones here. It's kind of like surprising that I'm like, wow, we're 4 movies in, they're still finding relatively creative ways to kill people. I'm not going to say they compare to the first 3 movies' traps, but I think they were decently creative and had some imagination behind it. At least the gore, you know, it was pretty consistent with the last couple movies. I think it is pretty good in this one. Like, the beginning of this movie is really fucking nasty, man. Like, it is really nasty, and I just looked away because I was like, dude, what the fuck? This was like the first couple minutes. So yeah, the gore, I guess it's pretty good. The special effects are all right. The acting is decent. There's some fun callbacks to the older ones. I say fun, but there's really nothing fun about any Saw movie. But, you know, those moments where you point and you go, oh, I remember that from like the first one or something along those lines. Callbacks, really. That's what they are. They're callbacks, and I think there's some decent callbacks here. Look, Saw 4, it ain't winning any awards. I wouldn't even say it's in the top 5 or upper echelon of Saw movies, but I mean, it wasn't like this huge drop after the third one and what happens in the third one. It was still a decent enough little horror flick. I mean, the ending and twist was so good that I really wanted to watch 5 right after, so I guess they did something right. But overall, Saw 4, yeah, it's alright. And so here we have Saw 6, which came out in 2009. Now, Saw 6 really plays off that strong ending of Saw 5 and just continues the train. Now, where this train is going, I do not know, but yeehaw, let's all get aboard the train. Let's go to the next Saw movie. But in all seriousness, the movie is about the detective still, and he actually gets someone to participate in a new game, a new character, this insurance agent that wronged John. And I actually think the story is pretty solid. There's a lot of callbacks to the first couple. They do flesh out John Kramer some more, but I actually did want to see what happened. Like, I really was engaged and intrigued, especially by the whole insurance thing. I was like, this is interesting. And what happens to Big Pharma? Oh, that gets a nice big thumbs up from me. Fuck yeah. I can really appreciate what happens to Big Pharma in this movie. It probably made me appreciate the story more than I even should have. The story, yeah, I think it was actually pretty alright to good, and I did like the callbacks. And like most of the Saw movies, the ending is actually pretty solid, and there is a good twist here. So yeah, that was pretty good. Now when it comes to Saw 6's traps and gore, I think it was actually a bit of a step up from 4 and 5. The gore is pretty decent to good here. The beginning is just fucking nasty, but the rest of the movie, yeah, I think the gore is solid. You know, it is pretty grotesque grotesque and it is gruesome. Not to the point where I wanted to throw up, but yeah, it's a gory movie. And the traps, you know, they somehow became even more elaborate from the previous ones, but they've gotten to the point where they're so incredibly elaborate that I think they've like completely did a 180 and are actually pretty decent. Maybe they weren't, and I just like seeing Big Pharma get what it deserves, but yeah, I thought the traps were pretty interesting here. They kept me interested and I actually sat up a few times for them. On top of that, I did think the pacing was actually pretty good at this movie. I didn't sit there going, is this movie almost over? Like, I'm starting to get a little bored here. I did not feel that with this movie, and I think that it really did capture the aesthetic of the first couple, even if this is the 6th time we're seeing someone run around some grungy, dirty basement or warehouse. The aesthetic and atmosphere, yeah, I think it was half decent. Look, Saw 6, I kind of like Saw 6. You know, I think it's pretty decent. I liked it for what it was. It doesn't reinvent the saw. Oh, you get instead of the wheel, but yeah, Saw 6, yeah, this one was alright. And here we have Saw 3, which released in 2006. Now, Saw 3 is a really straight, direct continuation of Saw 2, and it's about John Kramer in his dying days. I thought the story was pretty good here. They give some really good backstory to some of the characters. They really flesh out John even more, and the ending, well, obviously shocking, I still thought was good. This was before the Saw movies felt kind of formulaic with their story, like some of those later ones. I think the story was one of the stronger stories of the series here, and the characters were good. Now, the first thing I'm going to say about Saw 3 outside of the story, though, is this movie fucked me up. This is one of the this is the goriest movie I've ever seen in my life. Like, this movie really did fuck me up. I had to look away so many times. I actually felt sick. I actually felt physically ill watching it. They did not hold any punches. They show everything, every gory, grotesque detail, and the gore is really well done. It looks incredibly realistic, way better than the CGI shit. The gore is just out of control. It is really out there. You need a strong stomach, and it got to the point at times where it was kind of taking me out of it because I was just looking away for so long. I was like, dude, this is so fucking nasty. But aside from that, you know, I thought the acting was pretty decent to good here, but the traps, man, the traps are just fucking evil. The nastiest, goriest traps that the series has like ever seen. The ribcage one, like, I actually feel sick just even talking about it for this video. Like, the traps are really fucking nasty. They're really creative and imaginative, and I can't imagine a human being thinking of doing this to another human being, so I guess they're pretty creative there, but the traps are not fucking around in this movie. Like, Jesus H. Christ, what were they thinking of when they made some of these or like came up with them in their head? Like, these are just so brutal and so violent. This movie is just incredibly violent. The atmosphere is really just dark and depressing and heavy. Like, this movie has a totally different vibe from the other ones. This movie's actually scary. Like, it's so violent that it's just scary how violent it gets. This is the first movie on the list where I can say, yeah, it is actually scary. You know, the other movies kind of try to be a little scary, but I never thought the later Saw movies were really scary. This movie is scary. The vibe is just so heavy that it makes it scary. It's tense. While I wouldn't say it's my favorite Saw movie, I would still say it's one of the better ones and worth checking out if you like the first two movies. And here we have Saw 2 releasing in 2005. Now, Saw 2 is a direct continuation from the first one, and it really is all about exploring who John Kramer is. Who is this fucking guy? Why does he do what he does, and why does he choose these people in particular? And that's really what this movie explores. I actually think the story of Saw 2, yeah, it's pretty good, especially if you like the first one. There's a few throwbacks here I like, and I'd say the story generally, it's pretty good. The characters are solid. I really like them exploring John Kramer as a whole, and the ending, the ending is actually really good. The twist was really good in this one. I enjoyed that and did not see it coming. Now, they really beefed up not only the story, but the gore and the special effects in this movie as well. There's a lot more gore than the first one, and it's a pretty gory movie. It's not Saw 3 levels, but it's a violent, gory, brutal flick that has some really nasty parts to it, but it wasn't to the point where I was like just looking away for almost minutes at a time and just totally desensitized by the end of it. No, it's not that ridiculously gory like the third one, but there are some parts to it where it made me really wince and just grit my teeth and go like, yikes. There were some really nasty, creative traps in this movie. Like, that's one way of putting it, is creative. I think the entire premise is creative and unique, but the traps themselves, yeah, they're nothing like Saw 1's, and they're not overly complex and convoluted like some of the later movies. I think they're just kind of straight to the point, and they were actually pretty good traps, and I still can remember them quite easily now. There's plenty of good ones in this movie. I also did feel some kind of connection to these characters, and so I was more invested. Maybe that's because this is the second movie as opposed to like like the 5th or the 7th or the 10th movie, but I really did like the characters here. I really did want to see what happened and how they would get through these traps and overcome their challenges and win the game. And their acting wasn't bad either. I think the acting was pretty good. The atmosphere and the vibes this movie puts off is very similar to the first one. I quite enjoy it, and this is definitely a horror movie still. The movie does have some scary parts to it, and it certainly stuck with me a few days later after I watched it, where I was just like, shit, man, that is... that movie was something else. Look, Saw 2, there's a reason a lot of people actually really like it. I think it's a very good follow-up to the first movie. It's surprisingly a good follow-up. I just didn't expect it to actually maintain even a remotely close level of quality to the first one. I thought it was just going to be this immediate drop-off, but no. Saw 2, it's actually good. I can see why a lot of people like it. It wasn't my favorite one, but I still think it was very good. And here we have the original Saw, which came out in 2004, and you know, it's crazy how well the original Saw actually holds up and how good it still is as a movie, and it's crazy to see how far the series has come. But what's even crazier is that almost none of the flicks have been able to be as good as this original one. You know, the original movie was very budget, almost all of it's recorded in one room. The acting, it is a little hokey, the effects aren't as crazy as they would be in the later ones, but man, it really adds to the vibes and the atmosphere. This movie is able to capture this like psychological horror atmosphere that none of the other ones are able to capture. I really dig the atmosphere and the vibes of this movie. I was like, no, this shit is good. This reminds me of some of the best horror I've seen in media. I was like, it's just a really good vibe. And the story is actually really good, where it's just these two guys who wake up in a room and they don't know what the fuck's going on, and it just goes from there and gets crazier and crazier. I really enjoyed the story and the ending. The ending I did not see coming. I bet most people don't see the ending coming, but it was great. The twists were just really well done. Even to this day, I still think they're incredibly well done. Now, when it comes to the gore and the effects in this movie, you know, like I've mentioned, it is lower budget, so it doesn't look crazy, scary, realistic, but I also think it adds to the movie that it doesn't. The twists were just very good. Now, when it comes to the gore and the kills and the traps, I think it was also very well done. You know, it's lower budget, but I think it adds to the feel. And the practical effects, I can actually really appreciate the practical effects, or I think they are very good. The kills aren't insane or out of control or incredibly convoluted. The traps are pretty straightforward and easy to understand, and you know, they're no less gruesome. They don't feel like some fucking Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote created trap because they're just so ridiculous and convoluted. No, they're very to the point, and I can appreciate that, especially after seeing all the other Saw movies now. Something else that I can appreciate is the acting. I think it's solid enough. It's not big budget Hollywood actors, and I can appreciate that. The people were still convincing enough, and I was very engaged and intrigued and wanted to see the entire thing, so I guess they were doing something right. Look, the original Saw, it's a cult classic for a reason. A lot of people think that it's been downhill since then, and the original is and will always be the best. And I was under that mindset too. I was like, man, how are they ever going to top Saw 1? Like, the original's just always going to be the best. But then I saw Saw 10, Saw X, which released here in 2023, and this is actually not only my favorite Saw movie, but one of my favorite movies that I've seen all year. Now, I don't want to be one of those people who is like, yeah, after 9 movies, they finally figured it out, Saw 10 is hella good, but no. Saw 10 is actually really good. Saw 10 is as good as it is because of how good the original couple Saw movies were. It takes place in between Saw 2 and 3, and sees John Kramer trying to find a cure for his cancer. And then some bad shit goes down, and that's all I'm gonna say. The story in Saw X, I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was really well done. You know, it starts out interestingly enough, and the way it continues, I just did not see coming. I can appreciate that it has callbacks to the earlier Saw movies and ignores all the dumb shit of the later movies. It really is just about those older ones, and one of the reasons that the story is so good is John Kramer. Tobin Bell, the actor, does an amazing job in this movie. This is the best acting he's ever done. It's the best acting of the entire series. Like, you really come to care about John, and you want to see what happens. Like, in the other movies, he's usually the antagonist, but not like the main character. Here, he really is the main character. He's the star of the show. The whole movie centers around him, and I just really enjoyed it. I was like, damn, this is just really good. Like, I was surprised with how good it actually was. The acting is low-key top-notch, the storytelling's really good, and I actually was on the edge of my seat. I know it's hokey and cheesy to say, but I was on the edge of my seat to see what was going to happen next. Now, when it comes to the traps, I think they are pretty well done. Are they the most creative or original or innovative for the Saw series? No, I feel like we've seen a couple of these before, but the context with the traps and the context of who's in these traps and the emotions that they're able to add make them much more impactful, much more serious than just better. They also just didn't go balls to the walls out of control with the traps. I'd say it's a good medium between the second and the third one, and the gore is solid enough here. Yeah, it is special effects and CGI versus something actually being there or any practical effects, but it looked alright. It looked way better than Jigsaw, that's for sure. That eyeball trap though, that one was brand new. That one was not messing around. I was just like, oh yikes. I almost looked away for that one because that one was not messing around. Look, Saw 10, I don't really want to say anymore because I don't want to spoil it. I am very surprised that the latest Saw movie is, in my opinion, the best one. I really didn't think any of them were going to top the original, but yeah, I really did like Saw 10, and I think most people who can stomach the gore would like Saw 10 as well, especially if you like any of the other Saw movies. Like, if you like any of the first couple Saw movies, I think you're really going to enjoy this one, and it is a return to form. If we get a Saw 11, I hope it's in the nature or similar style as Saw 10. We don't need to continue what happens after Saw 7 because it was so shit. But Saw 10 gets a big old thumbs up from me, one of my favorite horror movies, and that's where I'm ending the video. You know, I hope everyone has a nice Halloween. If you enjoyed the video, let me know down below. Comment the word circle with a C. That'll tell me that you made it to the end, and you'll get a nice little heart from me. Hope everyone has a safe Halloween, and yeah, stay safe, especially after watching all these movies. And please don't ask me to play the Saw games. I am not interested in the Saw games at all. I just wanted to watch the movies and happened to do a little video on it. I don't plan on doing movie rankings in the future or anything. It was just kind of a one and done. So yeah, I'll see y'all later. I'm rambling. Have a good one. Like, share, subscribe. Bye.